Hi Acadiana, I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Welcome to your Monday. This is a kind of a special edition of Let's Talk Tropics as we now have Tropical Storm Francine officially now in the center part of the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of folks asking the questions, why didn't it get a name? Why was it still potential tropical cyclone number 6 over the course of the last day or so? And the reason is because the reconnaissance aircraft went out there. They really couldn't find that closed center of circulation. So there's kind of specific criteria there to go from potential to an actual tropical system. So we do now have Tropical Storm Francine that's out there, and we're going to go through all of the stuff. And I'll tell you what, folks, I've put a lot of graphics together here, so if there's a little mistake here and there, please forgive me. I am solo on this YouTube channel, but having so much fun doing all of this. Let's start out with the currents real quick. Just to let you know, we got partly cloudy skies, 83. Feels like 84. Dew points are starting to come up, and I think we're going to see some much warmer temperatures overnight tonight. It was a beautiful morning outside this morning with the clear skies, and you can see that there are some clouds that are starting to roll in, but roadways are dry. Things not necessarily so busy there on the interstate system right now, but I know the traffic here in Lafayette has been a little bit crazy as some folks are trying to grab some supplies here as we're down to probably just about less than 60 hours for when things are going to start to make a turn downward. So let's go ahead and go with what we've got here right now. Hurricane and tropical storm watches, and this is from the National Weather Service office over in Lake Charles. And again, when you do some of your research, whether it's through me, through on YouTube here, or whether it's local television stations or the local National Weather Services, try as much as you can to stay local, and that way you'll get the information that's going to be the most valuable to you. I know there are a lot of national channels that will probably be coming in here, and a lot of it is for entertainment too, but if you really want some good information, try to stick with all of the local media that's located here in Acadiana, because we live here too, and we know how these hurricanes and tropical storms affect our area, and we're just as concerned about what's going to be happening here as much as you are, because we all live here together. So we do have a hurricane watch that's in effect for East Cameron, Vermilion, Acadia, Lafayette, St. Martin, Iberia, St. Mary, and lower parts of St. Martin. That's in the bright pink there. And in the lighter part of the orange, you got a tropical storm watch. Those are for our western section. So as the forecast track has nudged its way just slightly to the east, more of an offshore flow may be more happening, or may happen more there in West Cameron and there in southeast Texas, but we still have a storm surge watch, and I'm going to go ahead and get into the particulars about storm surge and how it's going to affect each parish and what I have learned over the last 30 years when it comes to storm surge for parts of Acadiana, particularly St. Mary, Iberia, Vermilion, and the eastern part of Cameron Parish. So as we get started here, you can see that blob out there is quite large. We've got a fairly broad area of circulation that's there now, and as it stays in an area with relatively low wind shear and very warm waters, the forecast is we're going to get some strengthening out of this and potentially have a hurricane affecting the Gulf Coast of Louisiana here in the next couple of days. In fact, as the recon went out there, they've been finding these winds well over 50 miles per hour. So strengthening is forecast, and a lot of folks I've been seeing on social media, a little nudge this way, a little nudge that way, but really do not focus on the line or the dot. Focus on the entire cone. Rest of that dot, make sure that you're prepared. And east, of course, that is the part where you're going to be seeing the dirty side of the storm. So if you live up to 100 miles east of that circulation where it comes on land, you also want to be prepared. So again, don't focus on that narrow little line or that dot. And there's another closer look at the satellite here over the last few hours. And we're probably going to get a lot more convection surrounding it. It will eventually get a bit more symmetrical too. And when we see that, we will be seeing the strengthenings taking place. But we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty as some of this is going to be starting to edge its way onto the coast. Again, based on the forecast that we have at this hour, we would have some of these tropical storm winds perhaps reaching the Gulf Coast of Louisiana sometime Wednesday midday. So we're probably here about 48 hours for the folks that live right along the coast. There are a couple of showers out in the offshore waters. There are a few blips that are kind of showing up on land as well. but the air mass is pretty dry, so what we're seeing here probably isn't hitting the ground. More of the rains are going to stay out in the offshore waters, but gradually I think we're going to see better chances for rain as we start to get into Tuesday. And for those folks that are working in the offshore waters, I haven't heard anything about folks that are being moved out. I'm sure there are the plans for all the companies that are out there, but you can see that the wave heights are getting quite high now there over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico in that 11 to 15 foot range. And even in our offshore waters, we're seeing some seas getting 5 to 7 feet. So any of you guys, gals that are working in the offshore waters, feel free to share pictures on my social media pages. I'd really like to see what things look like. And of course, we can always give the rest of the folks better information if we actually have eyes on what's going on out in the offshore waters. So we do trust you fellas and ladies that are out there in the offshore waters working on the rigs. Hopefully everybody will be safe and moved if they need to be moved. So this is the latest forecast track and the current position. Of course, the coordinates are there on the left-hand side of your screen. Tropical Storm Francine packing 50-mile-per-hour winds. It's at 23 degrees north and 94.9 west. It puts it about 480 miles south of Cameron, and it is moving very slowly to the north-northwest at 5 miles per hour. And the movement of this is somewhat estimated too, because even though we're finding this broad area of circulation, for a little while as it's trying to get organized, there may be other smaller little circulations that could form, and eventually one is going to take over. So there might be a little wiggle room back and forth on where the initial site is, where the initial position is, and then of course the movement inland. And you can see there on the coast of Louisiana, the yellows and the pinks, those are the coastal as well as the inland watches and warnings that are out there. And that is because we are seeing the potential for hurricane force winds to pull inland as well. That's something that's a little bit different with the forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center that started out this year. And there's a look at our general group of hurricane models. So these are hurricane specific. And like I said, as many people say, oh, there's a little wiggle this way, there's a little wiggle that way. But if you look at Acadiana, every one of those lines except for one is covering the center part of Acadiana. So just by looking at this, if this were a final solution, I would say that almost every parish in Acadiana is going to be affected by either wind, rain, or possibly storm surge to go along with it. And some of those winds could be hurricane force. And right now, based on what I'm seeing here and based on looking at the different ensemble models and also on the intensity models, along with what we've got with the National Hurricane Center, for those of you who were here in 2020 and went through Hurricane Delta, this is going to be about the equivalent of the strength. Now remember, all tropical storms and hurricanes tend to do different things. So there may be differences in storm surge, there may be differences in the wind field, and there may be differences in the amounts of rain. But as a general rule, I would say this is going to be very similar to the strength of Hurricane Delta back in 2020. And, you know, some people might wave off a Category 1, but Category 1 hurricanes can be quite devastating, and they can knock power out for a number of days. If those of you who were here back in 2002 remember Hurricane Lily. Hurricane Lily was a Category 1 when it made landfall and continued to be a Category 1 as it moved inland. And there's a lot of you out there, especially over parts of Vermilion and Acadia and even western St. Landry Parish, that know how powerful a Category 1 hurricane can be even farther inland. And this particular storm appears it's going to pick up speed, forward speed, as it moves toward the coast. So if it moves faster as it goes inland, those winds won't have enough time to die down. So you could have additional wind damage going much farther inland. Now, this isn't rocketing to the north like some of your late season storms do, but it is going to move on shore at a pretty moderate pace. And not only will it bring the winds, but it's also going to bring the water. And I'm going to go through some of the little, what we call the slosh models that come from the National Hurricane Center, and it goes individually on different parishes. And they're a little bit hard to decipher, so I'm going to try my best to explain it. And hopefully those of you might have a bigger screen to be able to see this on. If you're watching on your phone, you may have to watch it later if you can project this on a larger screen television, and you'd probably be able to see what's going on a little bit better. But there is a storm surge watch for most of the Acadiana coastline, in fact, all of the Acadiana coastline, and anywhere from Cameron to Grand Isle. We're expecting storm surges that could be somewhere between 5 and 10 feet, which is significant. That would affect some of our cities along LA 14, especially over parts of Vermilion Parish. So let's go ahead and start with Iberia and St. Mary, and I'm going to try to highlight a few things on here because I know this is not an easy map to work with. So over here, this white shade that you see, this is the levee system that's around Morgan City. So that's kind of giving you your location. Franklin is right there, Baldwin is right there, Sharonton, Jeanerette, and then New Iberia is up here. So if you're in New Iberia and Jeanerette, the cities, I would say, you're not going to be affected by storm surge from this one, most likely. Some of the low-lying areas near the canals over here around Franklin could have some issues, and the same that goes over to around Baldwin. And there could be some freshwater flooding around Bayou Teche as well. So do keep that in mind. But most of these models here going down to the point, we're talking about possibly a 6-foot storm surge. The reds is where you start to get between 6 and 10 feet. And most of these low-lying areas are places that did flood in previous hurricanes. Hurricane Rita, for example, had a lot of coastal flooding. I believe Hurricane Laura also brought a considerable amount of flooding for these areas. So if you live south of LA 14 in Vermilion and Iberia, and you also live south or southwest of Highway 90, especially if you're getting down there toward the Intracoastal Waterway, those are the places that are going to be the most vulnerable. And we always say it's best to run from the water and hide from the wind. Vermilion Parish, of course, when we look back at Hurricane Rita and other storms, Erath, Delcambre, severely affected by those particular hurricanes. And as we look at Vermilion Parish, of course, the coastal sections getting down here toward Pecan Island, down along the LA 82 corridor. So basically anything that's south of the Intracoastal Waterway basically would be inundated by at least a 3 to 6 foot storm surge. Now, Abbeville is kind of a little bit farther out, but Delcambre, you can see, is kind of buried under here in that 1 to 3. So I would expect some coastal flooding in Delcambre and perhaps over in Erath and then other areas east of that along the LA 14 corridor. If you live on LA 14 west of Abbeville, I think you're probably going to be okay. But if you live south of the Intracoastal Waterway, or let's say within maybe 15 miles of the Intracoastal Waterway, I would be concerned about the possibility of storm surge flooding. So up to 6 feet where it's orange, up to 3 feet where it's yellow, and then you're talking under 3 feet here as you get down into the blue line. So there is that possibility that we could see storm surge flooding. So we'll go ahead and finish up with Cameron Parish. So the city of Cameron is right about in there. Grand Chenier would be kind of over in this area, maybe about over in this area here. It's kind of an elongated town there along LA 82 because there's not a lot of room to build north or south when you're over there. But you can see this is going to be somewhere between 3 and possibly up to 6 feet of storm surge, maybe a little bit higher too. And most of the time, southern parts of Vermilion, southern parts of Cameron, even when we get these low-end Category 1 hurricanes, sometimes do have that storm surge flooding. So pay attention to your local governments in Cameron, Iberia, Vermilion, and St. Mary parishes. I know they update their Facebook post or their Facebook pages quite a bit, especially Cameron Parish. They're really, really good at putting out the information there. So if you live in Cameron Parish, just make sure you're staying in touch with your local governments, and if they do say to evacuate, it is always best to do so, because if you get away from the water, you're going to be a lot safer. Wind you can hide from, but water is a lot harder to deal with. So we're going to go through a couple of the different things. The rainfall potential that we're seeing here is going to be quite high, anywhere between 6 and 12 inches of rain for the immediate Acadiana area can be expected through the end of the day Thursday. And outside of that area, going westward over toward Lake Charles, 4 to 6. And I wouldn't be surprised to see 4 to 6 easily getting over toward the New Orleans area too. So we are going to be seeing those very, very heavy rains coming down, and the flood potential is going to be extreme. Going in the moderate category, so that's 3 out of 4 when it comes to your flood risk. So there's a moderate risk of flooding, and this is basically for your freshwater flooding. This is your rainfall that's going to be coming down. So incredible amounts of rain could be possible. And because we had all the heavy rain that we saw last week, the grounds are already pretty saturated. The bayous and rivers are already high. So we're going to be on the outlook for some flooding, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see flood watches get posted here pretty soon. So let's go through some of the different models. And I know a lot of folks have been on social media sharing models, viewing models, and there's a ton of stuff that's out there. So this is the latest GFS, and if you're new to Let's Talk Tropics, usually we look at these and go out 10 days, but we're just going to focus on 3 days, and you can see the GFS is bringing a significant system basically right up into Vermilion Bay and then crossing off toward the northeast. So areas around Baton Rouge and Grand Isle and even Morgan City would be affected by this because of being on the eastern side of the storm. The Euro model, which really never bit onto this until the last few days, is very, very similar to the GFS. It's bringing a significant system, probably tropical storm, borderline Category 1 hurricane. It does bring it onto the coast of either Cameron or Vermilion Parish, so this is a little bit farther west compared to some of the other models. Canadian model is also the same. It lifts this up right over Vermilion Parish, west of Vermilion Bay, and slides inland. And believe it or not, the Icon model, which is one that, let's say 10, 11, 12 days ago, was pointing at a similar situation that we're seeing right now. But because it was the outlier of the hurricane models or the global models, it was really kind of dismissed. But coming up about the middle part of last week, when I started to see some of the other models coming into agreement with the Icon, because I'm telling you, the Icon was desperate to develop a tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico and has been for the last couple of weeks or so. But then when you start to see the other models start to follow along, and then when you get agreement between the models, that's when the forecast becomes a lot more confident. So the GFS, again, is bringing something. This is Wednesday at noon, so it would still be offshore, coming onshore. But as you can see about the position, it's there over the southwestern coast of Louisiana. Looks like it would be about ready to make its way onshore over parts of Vermilion Parish. So again, giving you a little bit of a timeline here. The Euro model is slightly slower than the GFS, but similar to where we're talking about a landfall. And the image that you're looking at here is 9 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday. So remember the first one, GFS, I showed you at noon. And this is the Euro model coming in at 9 o'clock. So the Euro running just slightly slower, but it's negligible because you still need to be ready to go. If this ends up being the final solution, this is what we need to work with, and you should be ready to go by early Wednesday morning. The HWRF model, which is a specific model when it comes to hurricanes, is also indicating a hurricane, probably Category 1, maybe even pushing Category 2, 979 on the pressure there. And if you notice the time stamp that I've got here at the top, this is Wednesday at 7 p.m. This would increase. These are hurricane force winds here on the west side and almost hurricane force winds on the east side. So and again, you see the winds are not quite as strong on land. You get a lot more friction once something goes on land. There's no friction out here, so those winds can just scream along without any worries. And real quick, just wanted to point out, if you look up here, max winds 71.5 knots, so that is a Category 1 hurricane on that particular model. HAF's model pushes a little bit farther to the east compared to the other ones. 971, max winds 62.2, so that pushes you pretty close to hurricane strength. But hurricane Category 1 is probably about what we're going to be expecting when it comes to this. Now, we're also going to be talking about why is this going to be pulling northward? Why is there a potential that it could be turning east? We kind of look at the mid-level pattern, and one of the features that we're kind of betting on here is low pressure that's back here. So you get that counterclockwise rotation around that. And if it moves off toward the northeast like this, it should be able to grab this and turn it off to the northeast. There's also a pretty big ridge of high pressure that's off the Carolina coast. And if it sinks a little bit farther to the south, that would also help to pull this inland over parts of Louisiana. So that's kind of the other players that are in here to see what's going to happen and what direction it's going to be moving in. Water temperatures, of course, are plenty warm. They can sustain any tropical storms. Water temperatures 31 degrees Celsius, 31, that's 86 to 88 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. And we've also got relatively good tropical cyclone heat potential. And for those of you that are new here, we measure the water on the top at the surface, and that's 80 degrees. But the deeper that 80-degree water goes, the more tropical cyclone heat potential you have. And there south of Cuba, you can see there's a ton of it. It's off the charts. But over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, it is still significantly high. So as this system, again, it's moving very slowly, so it's going to be churning up some of those waters from below the surface. But because those waters are 80 degrees going so deep, it can continue to pull up some of that premium fuel, and that sometimes can lead to intensification of tropical cyclones when they're moving over those areas. So let's talk about some of the inhibiting factors. Now, part of the reason why most of the models are not indicating a rapid intensification, getting this up to a major hurricane, and major hurricane is category 3 or higher. So this is the reason why we're looking at the intensity model staying at low-end category 2 or lower, is because of the wind shear. It's going to be battling it for a while. It's in a fairly lower area of wind shear right now, but you see here along the northern Gulf Coast, it's very, very high. So as long as it's in this little eddy right here, it should have a chance to get a little bit stronger based on the wind shear. But I will show you as wind shear, the wind shear map as we go into Wednesday. So this is Wednesday at noon. And you can see that's that low-end wind shear that it's coming from, and it's moving into a high wind shear environment. So let's just say between now and sometime on Wednesday, this strengthens up to, let's say, a category 1 hurricane with winds of 80 miles per hour. Most likely, as it continued to move northward, it would not increase in intensity. Now, I'm not saying that it can't, because this hurricane season has been a bit strange anyway, so we're kind of just looking at this as, okay, all bets are off at this point, because so far this system has managed to develop fairly well in a relatively high wind shear environment. But will it be able to continue to do that? But right now, with all the wind shear that's along the northern Gulf Coast, I think that would inhibit it from being a major hurricane. So I think we might top out as a category 1. But a category 1 is not anything to shake your head at, because those can be devastating as they move on shore. They can still bring a lot of storm surge, gusty winds. And one of my friends, Ivan Viator, made a comment on Facebook a couple of days ago. You remember, we've had all this very, very heavy rain, so roots in some of these trees might be loosened in that soft soil. So it might not take as much time to get, or much strength to get some of these trees to come down. And after May's storms, there's a lot of loose stuff that's out there, and there might be other things that are coming down. So do plan ahead for that. So again, most of you hopefully have a lot of this stuff or are preparing to get some of this stuff today. Your batteries, flashlights, water, non-perishable food, the usual stuff. And these are things that you should have on hand before hurricane season even starts. I would also go ahead and check out your first aid kit. Go and make sure that it's stocked up. Medicine, make sure you got enough prescription medicine. And if you do need some, try to get a refill as soon as you can. And also have all the personal hygiene and house cleaners around. And if you've got your IDs and insurance and important papers, put those in a watertight container, or better yet, take pictures of them and save it as digital. Or do both, that's even better. Make sure you got a basic tool set, all the supplies you need for your pets, and also enough stuff to keep your kids entertained when there's no electricity. And this is the one that I do for a week before, even though we're now getting down into the 72-hour mode. Have two plans. Some may be planning on leaving because of the storm surge effect of the coastal parishes. There may be some of you that are thinking, well, maybe I better go ahead and go. So you need to make that plan. Are you going to stay or are you going to go? This is the time to start securing your home and moving things inside, stuff that would blow around in the wind, patio things, plants, things like that. pull those in if you can, or secure them. Make sure you got a full tank of gas, because if we lose electricity, might have an issue with getting some gas. If you are planning on going, go ahead and make some reservations. Maybe you can make some that can be canceled if we do get a change in the forecast. And always alert your friends and family that are outside of the storm zone of your plan, because after a hurricane comes through, sometimes communications can go down, and the folks that live outside of the hurricane zone know where you're going and know what your plan is. Then people don't go missing quite as easily. So please do that. Make sure friends and family outside of the area know what your plan is. And we are within that 72-hour thing now. So make sure you're grabbing your last minute supplies, you know, the usual stuff, some ice and food. If you are leaving, make sure you choose 2 different evacuation routes. Try to leave some of the bigger roadways, the main evacuation routes, open for folks that live farther to the south. So if you live in Vermilion Parish, I would run east or west on 14 and take any one of those roadways that go north. And the same thing in Iberia Parish. Maybe run your way up through Henderson and get on I-10 that way, and kind of allow Highway 90 and I-49 for our friends that are even farther to the south, down into St. Mary or parts of Terrebonne Parish, and in case they, you know, need to get through, and they also aren't as familiar with some of the local roadways. So you know the back roads. Take the back roads, and make sure if you are evacuating, get out as soon as you possibly can. So real quick, I'm just going to show you some of the other stuff that's out there. We've got a couple of tropical waves, but at this point in time, we really don't have a whole lot to worry about. And there's a look at the 7-day tropical outlook. Again, there are a couple of waves out there, but right now, I'm not expecting these to bother us, at least at this hour. Most likely, these are going to be staying out in the Atlantic Ocean. So I will continue to keep folks posted on my social media pages. If you are on Facebook, you can find me at Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, or you can put at Meteorologist Dave Baker. Maybe Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today would be easier. Meteorologist is sometimes hard to spell. If you're on X, Twitter, it's at Dave Baker TV. And of course, you've all found me on YouTube. But if you want to tell your friends, it's at Acadiana Weather Today, all one word. There are some folks that are on my original Facebook page, friend requests. I have 5,000 friends. They won't allow me to have any more. So if you find that other Facebook page, Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, just go ahead and like that, and then you'll be able to get all the updates. It's not letting me allow more friends on there, and I think the last time I checked, there were a little over 600 friend requests. So if you want to get updates on my social media pages, go to those other pages, please. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics, and I hope everybody stays safe. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and please turn on those notifications. That way you know if I do any kind of severe weather coverage. There probably will be an extended version live stream coming up later on this week, particularly I think on Wednesday, as we're expecting the system to move a little bit closer. So if you've got those notifications on, you will get the alert when we go on. Plus, we have a morning show called Acadiana Weather Today, which is just a short morning chat of the area weather and how it's going to affect your day. But of course, I will go over Tropical Storm or what may be Hurricane Francine on that show tomorrow morning at around 7:30. I hope you all have a great day. I know a lot of work needs to be done. Stay safe, and I will see you tomorrow.